Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Mauskop, director and founder of the New York Headache Center. I'm also a professor of clinical neurology at SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University. And today I'd like to present a topic that's of great interest to me, and that is nutritional and herbal supplements for headaches. My previous talk was on the role of magnesium in migraines. So I'm not going to talk about magnesium, my favorite topic, and that's been the area of my research. We'll talk about all the other supplements and vitamins and herbal products that you might want to consider recommending to your patients. I think the second most effective supplement after magnesium in migraine patients particularly is coenzyme Q10, even though the American Academy of Neurology grades it as a level C evidence, but I think the evidence is stronger than that. The first study was done by Swiss neurologist Pierre Sandor. It was published in Neurology in 2005, and he showed that in the double-blind placebo-controlled trial, patients who received 100 milligrams of CoQ10 3 times a day did better than those on placebo. And as you can see, the 50% responder rate for attack frequency was 14.4% in placebo and 47.6% for CoQ10. So pretty significant difference. And we see that in our practice as well. The most definitive study, though, for coenzyme Q10 in children and mostly adolescents was done by Andrew Hershey and published in Headache in 2007. This was a good example of rational design. The reason it's rational, unlike many other trials of supplements, and I spoke about this in magnesium presentation, is that if you are not deficient in magnesium or CoQ10 or another supplement, you are not going to benefit from getting more of that product. In this case, Andrew did a study where he first measured CoQ10 level in 1,550 kids and found to have 1/3 of them to be deficient. And then, logically, he took those who were deficient and gave them a supplement. And obviously, CoQ10 levels went up. But more importantly, headache frequency improved from an average of 19 to 12. And headache disability improved from 47 to 22.8. Both statistically significant differences. And again, it's a fairly large trial. So my second most favorite supplement to recommend is CoQ10. On the other hand, you don't have to give CoQ10 to all of your patients because CoQ10 levels are actually available in most commercial laboratories like Quest and LabCorp. And the normal value is listed there as above 0.35, but from the migraine trials, we know that you should aim for at least 0.7. So if I have a patient whose level is less than 0.7, I will suggest that they take CoQ10. Sometimes I just tell them take 200 once a day. That's often sufficient because we don't have dose ranging studies to show that you need to take a certain amount of CoQ10 to get good levels. So CoQ10 is something that I think is very important to recommend to our migraine patients with or without a blood test. Another reason to do a blood test is because it is covered by most insurance plans, it will not cost patients anything. On the other hand, CoQ10 is fairly expensive, could cost patients $30 a month or more. Riboflavin of vitamin B2 is graded by the American Academy of Neurology as having level B evidence, but I actually would reverse that. I would give CoQ10 B and riboflavin C because the recommendation is based on one double-blind placebo-controlled trial. It was a well-designed and rigorous study done by European neurologists led by Jean Schoenen of Belgium. And he showed that taking 400 milligrams of riboflavin definitely improved number of attacks per month, except if you look at the graph closely, it took 3 months for people to start having improvement. And I don't know any patient who would want to take a supplement for 3 months to see if it works or not. Of course, we often combine supplements. You don't just give riboflavin and wait 3 months to see if it works. Um, so this is one study, it takes a while. And again, I think that more logical design would have been to measure riboflavin levels and then decide who needs it, who doesn't. And I think the results would be much more impressive. Just like with CoQ10, you can measure riboflavin levels in patients' blood. And I would again urge you to supplement if the patient is in the bottom quarter of normal range. So even if they're normal but low normal, I would supplement them. The amount of supplementation, just like with CoQ10, we don't know what's the right amount is. 400 milligrams is a mega dose. Normally, you need a few milligrams a day. So I often recommend 100 milligrams. And one warning I give to patients is that riboflavin is going to change the color of your urine. It becomes very bright yellow, almost fluorescent. So patients don't become concerned that something is wrong. That's a normal phenomenon. So riboflavin is something that's also on the list. Now, let's talk a little bit about other B vitamins. So we know that MTHFR mutation, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, particularly certain polymorphisms, are associated with an increased risk of migraine, especially migraine with aura. And multiple meta-analyses, case control studies showed that individuals who carry these mutations have a modestly increased risk of migraine with association being strongest for migraine with aura. And that mutation, as you know, leads to an elevated level of homocysteine. And people speculate that disruption of neurovascular endothelium by high levels of homocysteine could be triggering migraines with aura. It is also possible, I can speculate that the little white spots we see in the white matter hyperintensities we see in some migraine patients may be caused by high levels of homocysteine. So a study was done looking at supplementation with B vitamins in patients who have migraine with aura. This was a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial of 6 months of daily supplementation with folic acid, B6, B12 in patients, in 52 patients who had migraine with aura. So homocysteine levels in those people who took this combination dropped, obviously, but more importantly, the prevalence of disability dropped by 50% and headache frequency and pain severity went down as well. The first two differences were associated with MTHFR mutation. So what I do for all of my migraine patients with aura, if they have aura, I always check their homocysteine levels. And if it's elevated, I supplement with B vitamins, including riboflavin B2. I tell them to take a B complex, which has B vitamins, but also separately B12. I definitely check B12 along with homocysteine. And one point about B12 levels in the US, normal level, depending on the laboratory, is anywhere from 200 or 250 up to 11 to 1200. And most neurologists actually recognize that less than 400 is a deficiency. And Quest Laboratories have a disclaimer on the bottom that people with levels below 400 have 5 to 10% chance of neurological and hematological problems. The question is obviously, why don't they raise that bottom level, normal level, to 400? Actually, in Japan, the bottom cutoff is 500. And some people speculate that the lower incidence of Alzheimer's might be related to the fact that they treat their B12 deficiency early when it dips below 500. Alpha lipoic acid is also called thioctic acid in Europe, and it's actually approved in Germany as an intravenous administration for diabetic neuropathy. There is very little evidence that it works for neuropathies orally, but nevertheless, I recommend that supplement for some of my patients. And in migraines, we have one study comparing 600 milligrams of alpha lipoic acid. Usually I recommend 300 twice a day. So this was against placebo, and 50% responder rate for frequency had no difference, but there was some improvement in frequency and some improvement in headache days and severity. And there were no side effects. Although as far as side effects, it is an acidic product. It's an acid, so I always warn patients to take it with food, and some people do develop heartburn and stomach issues with alpha lipoic acid. Omega-3 fatty acids, again, not very strong evidence, but actually there are some studies. This was in Journal of Pain, published in 2013. It was a single-blind study of 56 patients, and they showed that increasing omega-3 acids and reducing omega-6 fatty acids reduced headache pain and altered anti-nociceptive lipid mediators and improved quality of life. Again, small study, single blind. This was another study published in British Medical Journal in 2021, and they also tried to manipulate the ratio of omega-3s and omega-6 fatty acids in headache patients with migraines, and it was a randomized controlled trial. And they showed that the active groups, where there was an increase of EPA and DHA, did better, had a decreased frequency and severity of headaches, but no significant improvement in quality of life. So as you see, the active groups, in one group, they maintained linoleic acid at around 7% of energy, and the second group, they increased EPA and DHA as well, but decreased linoleic acid, and the control group had no changes. So both the first and second group did better than the control group. Now let's switch to the herbal products that have some scientific evidence that they might be helpful. In the American Academy of Neurology, American Headache Society give it a level B. Feverfew is a common plant, extremely safe. It's been around as a medicinal herb for 100 years or more. And this was the most rigorous study. There have been other small studies, but this was the most rigorous study done in Germany by Hans Christoph Diener and published in Cephalalgia. And it was a study of 170 patients. But the uniqueness of this study is that they used a very standardized extract. And that's the issue with all herbal products. Just like wine will grow in different places and yield different grapes, the same with any plant. If they grow in a shady spot or depleted soil, the amount of what might be active ingredients in those herbal products will vary. So this German group took feverfew extract and standardized it for certain ingredients that are considered the active ingredients. But more importantly, they just had a very, very standardized product, which has been promised to be brought to the United States because it was tested in a rigorous study. But we have not seen it yet. So far, we have to rely on the products that are available over the counter with much less rigorous controls. So this study had 89 patients on feverfew and 81% on placebo, and the average frequency of migraine attacks was 4 to 6, and there were no prophylactic drugs given at the same time. And here are the results. There was a reduction in number of attacks from 1.9 to 1.3, and global assessment of efficacy was statistically significant difference, but there were no differences in side effects, but there was no effect on the duration of attacks. So again, if I recommend feverfew, sometimes I recommend it as a triple combination of magnesium, feverfew, riboflavin. There is a commercial product that combines all three. Although magnesium, there is mostly magnesium oxide, which is not necessarily the best absorbed, still can be helpful. Or you can recommend feverfew as a standalone, and patients often ask me which brand to buy. I usually consult consumerlab.com. It's a subscription-based independent company that does assessments of many, many supplements and herbal products. But in general, I would just recommend major brands that we know will likely have better quality than some unknown brands. And there is not necessarily a correlation between the cost and the quality. Could be an inexpensive product, but good quality products. Manufacturers like Nature's Way, Nature's Bounty, Nature Made, Solgar, and sometimes the large store brands like CVS can be good. Next herbal supplement is a Butterbur, and according to the Academy of Neurology, it has level A evidence. Well, actually, I was one of the participants of this large double-blind study published in Neurology in 2004. It was done at three centers, and we had three groups: placebo group, 100 milligrams of Butterbur, and 150 milligrams groups of milligrams of Butterbur. And the main outcome measure was attack frequency. So we actually were very impressed with the results. Patients on 150 milligrams of Butterbur had a 48% reduction in migraine attack frequency compared to 36% in 100 milligram and 26% placebo. So the 150 milligram group distinguished itself from the placebo group, and that is what I recommend. Now, there's a big issue with Butterbur, and that's why, even though I was the author of this study, I wrote a letter to the editor in Neurology that was published cautioning people about the safety issues with this product. According to WebMD, some Butterbur products may contain alkaloids that have major safety concerns, and they can damage the liver, lungs, blood circulation, and possibly cause cancer. It's also unsafe when given to pregnant women as well. So, bottom line is taking Butterbur by mouth is possibly unsafe. This is a Butterbur that we used in the clinical trial was made by the German company Weber and Weber, and the brand is called Petadolax. So that product is produced under very, very strict manufacturing conditions. And when the patient asks me and they want to try it, I would tell them you have to buy this brand. It's an expensive brand. But it's worth paying for it because you're less likely to get hurt by this product. So in general, I don't recommend Butterbur as a first, second, or third line product. The other thing is the company that makes Petadolax, Butterbur, was initially approved for sale in Germany, but then the company claimed that they improved the extraction process, made it better and safer, but Germany regulates the herbal products as strictly as drugs, so the regulatory authorities requested that the company repeat safety trials, but they didn't want to spend the money. It's not cheap to do it. So they were not allowed to sell the Butterbur product that's made in Germany, and all forms of Butterbur are banned in Switzerland and UK. So when the patient asks you about trying Butterbur supplements, again, I would recommend using just that expensive German brand, because if you go on Amazon, you'll find some products for $10 a bottle, but you don't know how safe those products are. Petadolax is more like $50, $60 a month supply. So that's a story of Butterbur. Boswellia, unlike Butterbur, and very much like feverfew, is a very safe herb. That's also called Indian frankincense. And it can be taken in any form, and you don't have to worry about safety. Of course, quality control is still important because sometimes a product that's labeled Butterbur may have something else in there, different herbs. So yeah, again, you have to tell patients to stick to well-established nationally recognizable brands. So this was a study by European group. Chris Lampel from Austria led this study showing that there is long-term efficacy of boswellia for patients with chronic cluster headaches. And glycine is one of the main active ingredients when isolated from boswellia, was shown to have a good effect on indomethacin responsive headache syndromes. So hemicrania continua, chronic paroxysmal hemicrania, and I have seen the response in patients, people who don't tolerate indomethacin, have GI problems. Definitely worth trying boswellia. Glycine is no longer available. It was for sale. It's probably not easy to make, and the market is pretty small, so there's no manufacturer that makes this active ingredient called glycine, but boswellia is widely available, and it often is advertised for joint pains because it has anti-inflammatory properties. And I've had some patients who tell me, my headaches didn't get better, but my joints are hurting less. But you could possibly benefit in both ways. So keep it in mind for migraine patients, but also for cluster hemicrania continua when patients don't tolerate drugs and they need something extra, whether it's by itself or adding on to an existing treatment. Boswellia is safe and can be effective in some patients, but clearly will never be a double-blind placebo-controlled trial because these syndromes like cluster headaches and indomethacin-sensitive headaches are very rare, so there have not been any double-blind trials in indomethacin-sensitive headaches. But nevertheless, it's safe, inexpensive, worth a try. Ginger has one double-blind placebo-controlled trial as an addition to acute migraine treatment, but I usually recommend ginger for people who complain of nausea, and I recommend it as a daily supplement of 500 milligrams a day, one capsule a day. Obviously, ginger, if you add raw ginger, it's spicy and definitely can cause GI problems, but for most people, if you take it with food, it's well tolerated and has many other beneficial properties, anti-inflammatory properties again, and also might help the nausea. So ginger is another good supplement for patients who prefer not to take drugs. And to close my talk, a few words about the effect of peppermint. It's sort of like aromatherapy. This study was done by Hartmut Goebel from Kiel in Germany again. He's a very good researcher, and he looked at the effect of peppermint and eucalyptus oil, an effect on neurophysiological experimental algesic headache parameters. So it was a controlled study, double-blind, placebo-controlled, 32 healthy subjects, and they tested EMG activity, receptive suppression periods, contingent negative variation, sensitivity to experimental pain, and current mood states. So they compared peppermint eucalyptus against the smell of alcohol, ethanol. So combination of peppermint oil and ethanol, actually ethanol was used as a medium for peppermint, had an analgesic effect. And that is, analgesic effect was measured by inflating a blood pressure cuff to the point of pain. So that's how they measured pain threshold in these healthy individuals. It also has muscle relaxing effect and mentally relaxing effect. Well, I should mention that the eucalyptus oil did not have any beneficial effects. So how do you use it in practice? Many patients with migraines are very sensitive to strong odors. So I usually recommend using a little vial. You can easily buy it in any pharmacy, a vial of essential oil of peppermint, and they carry it with them. And if they're exposed to a noxious smell or perfume, they just put it on their nose or they rub it on the wrist and smell it to block the noxious smell. Or they can use it as a adjunct to relieve some pain. Obviously, it's not a powerful pain relieving effect, but peppermint is something that can be helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at drmauskop@nyheadache.com. And thank you for listening.